a long-term battle between the priority of industrial and port uses versus a sports village. And I guess the thing that's not clear to me, even in the document in terms of specificity, maybe this is certainly the purview of the council in terms of us providing additional information, is that how do they, through this document, weigh the dual priorities that the city is putting forward in this document as a result of the retention of industrial uses related to the port and trucking, and the creation of a stadium and a village associated with it?
Well, I think what we're looking at from an environmental impact standpoint is we're looking at the land use chapter first and foremost, and one of those being, does it physically divide an established community, or does it create a fundamental conflict? So we did not believe that it was in the situation of, physically dividing a community. That's something more left for, when a freeway is, punched through a neighborhood, or something really like does create a physical divide. We feel that this site is not integrally connected into the actual seaport itself, and it's actually would just become it sits between the middle of Jack London Square and the other seaport properties, and it's not integrally connected into all those other streets. So we did not feel that there was an argument for saying that it would physically divide an established community at all. What we really focused in on the EIR process is what issues could come up that would really create an issue, leaning towards sort of the fundamental conflict of, this use on those activities. So there are a number of mitigations in there that talk to, some of the things that were raised about water safety. There's actually a mitigation that requires OBD patrols to enforce the channel regulations. So, there's always been concerns about kayaks sort of sitting out in the area, similar to how they do with, what's it called now? Oracle Field, almost called it Ballpark, out in the McCovey Cove. So one, if balls were hit into the estuary from here, it'd be a pretty monster home run. I think somewhere close to 1,000 feet. But nonetheless, there's certainly the concern of the kayaks coming just because their activity is happening there. So we did put in that mitigation requiring the boat patrols in the area. We also have other things that are sort of like buffers in place to soften the edges, and then there's also the limitation on residential west on the west end of the project site. So it kind of takes those residents away for concerns about complaints or air quality, noise, those kind of things. So it sort of creates that buffer by shifting the residents further to the east. So really that was the context that we looked at in terms of like what would be potential conflicts.
Let me just
and then a lot of the transportation analysis was also done to relieve a lot of the issues too, with trucks coming in and out as well.
So let me just sort of follow up. So thanks for that starter on that. The sort of companion part of that is, I guess, what I would describe as the scale of the proposed project under maximum CEQA analysis versus the alternative, which is an encroachment in the turning basin option. And what I've sort of read as a layperson is the importance of the port, the revenue generation of the port, particularly time during this COVID era where supply chains are really being challenged and stuff like that. And I guess I sort of wonder about that chunk that would put the turning basin as an alternative versus a sort of given as a part of the primary project. So maybe you could talk about that relative to that. And I realized the project sponsor decided that, and we looked at the alternative, but the balance in my mind is also about ensuring that both, to what you described, both the industrial and the sports village basically can live side by side. So can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah, so to the turning basin, as I tried to touch on earlier, the maritime reservation scenario is not the turning basin. The purpose of the maritime reservation scenario is to look at what would potential impacts be? May they be different from the baseline project in the event that the maximum 10 acres is taken out of the project site as is currently allowed as part of the term sheet with the port. So the turning basin is a separate project that is proceeding currently with the port. So what the maritime reservation scenario is representing is the maximum area that the port could take back. And what would that be in the event that that turning basin was that large? I believe currently they're moving forward, and I think the turning basin as proposed now is something closer to like 1 to 3 acres potentially coming out of the site and not 10. However, this is still just in the early studies, early feasibility studies. And again, that project is a completely separate project from this project. So the maritime reservation scenario is not saying, are we going to have a turning basin expansion or not have a turning basin expansion? It's just acknowledging that a turning basin very well may happen. And if it takes the maximum extent of the chunk out of the site, what would the resulting site plan be? And then we studied the impacts that would potentially be associated with that as well. So we made sure that was fully covered in the CIR.
Okay, I guess I will just sort of say it's not really clear where the port is in this process. So I'm not entirely, I guess I don't entirely follow what the dialogue has been on that. So thank you for the clarity.